Easter 10 years ago. I have a very good reason to remember Easter 10 years ago because I came to this church for the first time on Good Friday 10 years ago, and I wasn't wearing a collar because I'd been retired 2 weeks and I was desperate to work out who I was. Because when you've been doing this for a lifetime, to retire, well, of course I haven't really, have I? Because here I am. But at the time, it was like suffering a little death. The first Easter in 40 years where I had not been leading services and being the big I am up the front, you know. And I remember it well because Sarah, as it was then, welcomed me warmly, not knowing who I was, and I stayed for a while, as you know, because you welcomed me at a time when I felt dead. Now, resurrection takes a bit of practice. And today we celebrate the resurrection. And the gospel accounts that we have, all 4 of them, are different. And that doesn't matter, because if you ask anybody what happened 10 years ago, you will have had a different remembrance to that Friday, that Good Friday, from the one I have. And if you were to write down what happened, it will be different to what I would write down. So it doesn't matter that they're different. But I want to think today about the Mark version, which says this. At least it would be if I had the sermon on the right page. Just a minute. Are you recording this, Paul?
Yes.
Low. I shan't be asked again, shall I? The short ending of Mark says this: you are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. He is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you. So kind of different to the John that we had read. And it was said to the women who had gone to the tomb. And do you know what they did? The women, could have been men, but it happened to be women, all right? This is not misogyny. The women said nothing to anybody. I've never known that happen. Jan's not here, is she? No, sorry. They said nothing to anybody because they were afraid. They were afraid that Jesus was risen, or that they were being told that when they come to take care and to anoint and to weep. Lucy Winkett, she's the vicar of St James's Piccadilly, I think these days, was quoted recently in the papers as saying this: the British are reticent about talking about religion. They regard their church going in a similar way as their visits to the bathroom. That it's good manners not to tell anybody they're going, not to say where they've been, and never mention what happened there. Well, there we are, you see. It's very British not to want to speak about religion. And that's what happened to those women. I reckon that's not an entirely inaccurate summary of the way a lot of us feel. Our attitude to church and its comforts, for comforts there are, aren't there, are that it's private. And we are not alone. The reality of the human condition leaves many entombed by their attitudes. by their circumstances or by their life choices. We remember that the stone was rolled away, but metaphorical stones closing up the tomb are everywhere. The rock of disappointment, or insecurity, or poverty, or guilt. We're often sealed in by the rocks of arrogance, or confusion, or addiction, or indifference. Our eyes adjust to the darkness of the tomb we choose. And almost anything that stands between a person and the transforming presence of the divine can be seen as a stone in need of rolling away. And perhaps one of the largest stones in need of being rolled away is the popular Christian notion of what life after death means for the individual. The idea that worthy believers will somehow be resuscitated in another more paradisal life is the conventional wisdom expressed at almost every funeral in Western culture. With roots in ancient mystery religions and beliefs developed by the Pharisees grieving loved ones, those preparing to die for a cause or those who are forced to enjoy hardships in this life are assured that there is a better life somewhere beyond this mortal coil. And there's nothing wrong with that as far as it goes. As the Jewish sect of the Sadducees did not hold to a belief in a general resurrection, Matthew puts them in a story proposing a hypothetical resurrection question to Jesus. And they say this to him, you remember. If a woman is married multiple times in succession because each of her husbands dies, whose wife will she be in heaven? And in dismissing the question, Jesus seems clear that any of our earthly categories of identity, with or without dog collars, ceases to have meaning beyond this life. He says, "For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven." However you picture that. But regardless of how little biblical evidence there is for popular ideas of life after death, many people take comfort in the simplistic idea that they will somehow be with their loved ones in the next life. I know because I feel that way. I mean, how else do you deal with the awfulness that is death? But this idea has become so fixated in the minds of many faithful that it could often be perceived as the primary reason that people claim an allegiance to Christianity. And when it becomes that, it becomes a major obstacle in understanding any deeper meaning of resurrection and to the living of one's life in the present, which is all we have control over. For whatever perspective we may have on life after death, the eternal is not something off in some vague, unknowable, distant future. Whatever the eternal might prove to be, it begins here, as part of who we are today. Today is Resurrection Day. Not just for Jesus, but for us. Today is Resurrection Day. He goes ahead of us, not just into Galilee, but into Braintree. Oh, that's good. I like that. Just a minute. I want to encourage us today to practice resurrection, because part of who you are is who you will be after death. So don't be afraid to live. As a motivation to live every moment to its fullest, Socrates exhorted his followers to practice dying as the highest form of wisdom. And such immediacy can radically change one's world and teaches the importance of re-evaluating priorities. There's a bloke called Levine who wrote a book called How to Live This Year as If It Were Your Last. And 10 years in retirement, I can't have much longer, can I? Anyway, he put his experience of living each day as if it was his last to the test with hospice patients, and his daily encounters with those who had been given a terminal diagnosis revealed to him people with transformed lives. Their perspective on life changed. Their priorities were reordered, and many of the circumstances and choices that had crippled them before their diagnosis evaporated into new life. So Levine, the writer, set a date for his own expected death. He didn't know, but he set a date for it anyway, and lived as if he would die on that day. And his book is a record of his radical experiment to get a glimpse of that transformation for himself. And in so doing, he gained a new appreciation for the need to live each moment mindfully, as if that were all the time he had left. So the message of the resurrection, my friends, and I do count you my friends, is not simply don't be afraid to die, but don't be afraid to live. All of us, when we lose someone we love, and we all have, and on our own day of dying, will need the comfort of resurrection. But I believe the message of Easter is not simply don't be afraid to die. Please hold on to don't be afraid to live, because the resurrection is now in your life. For life is precious. It's to be shared with generosity. The Gospels are very clear about this. What should also be clear is that resurrection isn't just limited to the experience of Jesus or to how we understand a life after death, but in passing from death to life in the here and now. The message of resurrection and of Easter hope is that we can live fully in this life, giving of ourselves and risking for love's sake. What am I asking you to do then? Help someone who's hurting. Open the eyes of love for someone who is blind. Free a captive. Heal a wound. Give the gift of yourself, for the gift of who we are was given to us in order to be given away. An aging pious man, Rabbi Susya, became fearful as death drew near. His friends chided him. What? Are you afraid that you'll be told off because you weren't Moses? No, the rabbi replied, that I was not Susya. The secret to practicing resurrection is in giving who we are and what we have completely, wholly away to something greater than ourselves. In escaping from circumstances and choices which entomb us, and entering into a new life in the here and the now. In life and in death, Jesus modelled this generosity, this transformation. As we embrace resurrection as a credible and meaningful principle for life, we, like Jesus, may become more than anyone around us or even we ourselves could have imagined. Gandhi used to say, "You can live it. You can embody it. Embody the change you seek. Embody it." So, let's celebrate the power of resurrection as a way to live today, unafraid of death and unafraid of what others may think of us as we seek to live selflessly loving, even our enemies, and unafraid to be who we are. Good luck with that.